Despite giving a rambling and deranged and way too long campaign speech that effectively lowered the intelligence of everyone forced to listen to it, there is some good news for Donald Trump coming out of last night. And for once, I'm not being sarcastic about that. The initial reaction of people watching it was more positive than one might think, considering how ridiculous it was. But that said, there is some stuff lurking behind the good news, something that he should be worried about, and I will get to that. But first, let's give the positive reaction. So for those watching the speech, 76% approved of it. I don't know if that's specifically they approved of it finally ending, but they approved of it, which is high, and I would not have expected that, certainly. Now, to be fair, it was a pretty Republican audience watching it. Again, that's not the American people approving it, that's people who watched it, which was a slight majority Republicans. Only 20% of those who watched it were Democrats, 27% were independents. And obviously their evaluation is gonna be a little bit different. But to be fair, Biden's address was probably watched more by Democrats than by Republicans. This is sort of what happens. That said, don't assume that independents and Democrats like this is all that I would say. But so overall, he can say the approval rating was pretty high. Where it gets a little bit more ridiculous and maybe a little bit harder for people with common sense to understand is, how did it make you feel? They asked the speech watchers. 68% said it made them feel hopeful, 54% proud, 27% worried, and 16% angry. So there were some negative things there, but coming out of there being hopeful, I mean, look, I will say this, and I try to understand what the American people are thinking, why they do what they do. There are a lot of people who are really desperate, and I think they're desperate to feel some hope. And so maybe even the deranged ramblings of a man in the twilight of his life making no specific plans for the future is enough to give them some brief hope. And I don't necessarily begrudge them that. But that said, when you ask them, what was Trump in this speech? So these characteristics, do they apply to him? 74% presidential. I mean, I guess he was standing at a podium. I guess Congress was facing him. Is that all that it takes for him to qualify as presidential? He called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. It doesn't strike me as super presidential. But anyway, 74% entertaining. Sure, some people like that stuff. Inspiring, 71. Unifying at 62. What? 46% said divisive. So divisive was less common than unifying. But look, I'm not gonna say whether I think it was divisive or not. I'm just gonna say it was intended to be divisive. It was intended to attack and mock the Democrats. And also, by the way, mock, as I pointed out earlier in the show, many of the Republicans as well. He doesn't care about the Republicans in Congress either. It was intended to do that. And 62% of the audience is like, no, I can't tell what the mission of this speech was. So that's a little bit disconcerting. And on particular issues, 68% coming out of it said, does Trump have a clear plan for inflation? Yes, he does. What? I mean, look, if I'm like trying to put on like galactic brain sort of thinking, does he have a specific plan for inflation? Yes. To raise it? Like, yeah, the trade war will effectively do that. And he is specific about that. So I will grant them that, but I don't think that's what they meant. So I'm a little bit confused about that there too. But we're gonna discuss, I will say that that poll right there is the beginning of theoretically something that looks good on the surface for Trump, but is actually something he should worry about. And I'll return to that as we get into a few more numbers. But what did you make of how people took the speech, Sharon?
Well, a couple of things. He continues to be graded on a curve. Okay, you mentioned the Pocahontas nonsense. He says anytime he's speaking, it is offensive, it's aggressive, it's bullying, it's dumb, really dumb. So when he just can stand and breathe and pause occasionally, you're gonna get graded on the curve. It's a high mark. It's a high mark, okay, that he is still there and not just eating a bucket of chicken on Air Force One and flying around and playing golf. So that's it. That's part of it. The other part is these are the same people, I believe, and I know you're gonna get to some of the deeper meaning of this kind of response, but these are the same people who are still thumbing their nose at America and pissed off, and some don't even know why, some do. It's usually blaming people who they look down on, okay, who are just hardworking Americans too, equal Americans. They're the same people who leave a poll and they want to mess with these election people, and they kind of pretend they voted for Hillary when they really voted for Trump. And they want to play this continuous game. So I kind of think that it's hard to get a true sample. It really is anymore in America, because they're either indoctrinated, grading on a curve, or deliberately messing with systems.
Yeah. Well, that's some of the responses. You could see how CNN's immediate one was a little bit more negative for Trump or whatever, but whatever. I'm fine with going with the ones that make it seem a little bit more positive, particularly because, again, like people having a good reaction to it theoretically might be good in the moment, especially because his approval rating has been going down. But here's the thing. I often say if Trump would just be honest about what effect the trade war is going to be, it would not only be more honest, but also politically that would be a good thing, because when it does damage, at least people will know that you told them it would. Like lying actually politically could hurt you in the future. Well, if people come out of this speech thinking, oh, Trump does have a plan for inflation, is that actually better for him than them coming out thinking he doesn't? Because he doesn't, let's be clear, and inflation is going to go up. And so when that happens, these people are going to be even less prepared for it than they would if they didn't think that he had a plan. He raised expectations that he's already pre-planning not to meet. Is that actually good politically? Maybe in the short term. Maybe some people will be like, well, I guess he's a little bit better than I thought he was. But now they're expecting results and they're not gonna get them, not good results anyway. And again, I wanna get to some other numbers. These are sort of leading into the not State of the Union, State of the Union. 47% said that the State of the Union was very strong or strong. That means it's net negative. That's not good historically to start off a presidency. And you can look at, if we go to this next graphic, you're gonna see that the percentage saying that it's strong, the only percentage who were less, of the American people that were less confident about the State of the Union was the last time he came in. They've generally been a little bit more confident and secure at the beginning of like the Biden presidency, the Obama presidency, even Bush, who was a little bit low. The previous Bush was a little bit low. But Trump just, again, he creates this chaos. People are not confident. 56% of those polled by NPR, Marist, say that Trump is rushing to make changes without considering their impact. That includes 65% of independents. 2 out of 3 independents are like, he's not thinking this through. Most said that the cuts to the federal government are doing more harm than good. 60% said federal employees are essential, including, again, 2/3 of independents. And so the stuff he's doing might get the Republicans in Congress to cheer him or whatever, and his base might be happy, even though there's a little bit of shakiness even there. But for Democrats, and much more importantly, politically, for independents, they don't like what they're seeing. And so when you keep doubling down on these plans that are unpopular among the wider electorate, and also likely to do damage, the specific sort of damage that people voted based on in the last election, that is a recipe for just not only terrible economic outcomes, but terrible political outcomes for the Republicans. So Donald Trump, I'm sure, is basking in the moderately positive reception. By the way, that number that we showed you for like people who think that it was a good address is still lower than past presidents. It's just net positive. It's net majority positive. So I'm giving him credit for that. But again, it's still down. And so even that, not the best news ever. But again, it could be the forward to some coming chapters that might be pretty negative for him. So everybody just bear that in mind. Any final thoughts before we close things out?
No, I think people, I want to amend my previous answer, are giving up. I think they're just realizing that the government can't do anything for me. We're on our own. And so we'll see how it goes, but they're not expecting much. I just don't think they're expecting much, and that's part of what we're seeing here. And they're right not to expect much. Well, they should expect more doom and gloom, but not much positive.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I know, they've been frustrated clearly from the results of the past few administrations, and again, they've lurched in the opposite direction. Donald Trump isn't doing anything that I think you could reasonably say is going to stop that pattern, but we'll see. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.